Saltair's time for carrying out emergency jobs is 2.13 years compared to the Scottish average of 5.6. Timescale for completing non-emergencies is 0.084 days compared to the Scottish average of 9.4. We believe that COVID has helped that, so we'd expect that to get a wee bit lesser in the future. 2.23, again, repairs right first time, 9.25. Moving to 2.26, 3 stage 1 complaints were received in relation to Saltair this year, and responded to within 1002 were upheld. 2.27 investigation, there was 1 stage 2 complaint received in relation to Saltair, and it was responded to within 10 scales and not upheld. And at 2.28, the comparison for Saltair's complaints of 12,451 complaints, that was around the figure of 0.3%, which equates to 38 complaints over the period. And just a quick response to Councillor Weir, it was 195 complaints from mayors out of 47,500 complaints. Thanks, Councillor. Happy to take any questions. Sorry, Convener. I think you might be on mute.
Anyone, any questions on this? I'm not seeing anything in the chat bar. I just want to give people the opportunity to convey, just in case I'm not seeing anything. A very solid and positive report. With no questions for agenda item 3, can we agree the recommendations as noted? Thank you very much. Can we come on to item 4? This is a topic that I promised the committee that we would bring more information on, and it's the new supply community benefits, paper page 35, agenda item 4. Pam, can I come to you, please?
Yeah, thank you, Convener, and good morning, everyone. As the Convener said, this report was really just to give some further information to members regarding the community benefits that arise from the new build contracts over the last 2.5 years. As members will be aware, there's a requirement on our contractors to deliver community benefits as part of their contract conditions. And these, as we call them, community benefits, are obviously over and above the economic benefit that the investment brings to an area through direct employment and also opportunities for subcontractors and local supply chains. So this is the over and above those benefits. And our approach has been to try and use those opportunities and those community benefits for the benefit of those who are maybe furthest from the labour market, the most disadvantaged, and people and young people who need the most support. So we have made a conscious effort through a dedicated resource within the new supply team to work closely with colleagues and other services through employability, supported enterprise, routes to work and others, to make sure that we're using these opportunities and working with contractors, as I say, for the benefit of those people who maybe need the most support. So the report really tries to give a flavour of the range of community benefits that the contracts have been able to achieve, and they range from obviously direct employment opportunities, apprenticeship opportunities, training, placements, and other sort of taster sessions, and also trying to get into schools, trying to sort of encourage younger people to look at construction as a future career, as well as supporting maybe local community initiatives or community groups who've got community projects. So say that hopefully the report is of use to members in terms of trying to give that overview. As something that will obviously continue to develop and bring further updates back to committee in terms of as the work progresses. But I think it's hopefully fair to say that you know, we are it's a good example of the range of partnership working that's going on in this area. And also, I think it's also fair to say that our contractors that we have been working with are very supportive and keen to engage with us and to do everything that they can for the benefit of local people, and particularly given that, as we'll talk about later on, some of the challenges in terms of trying to recruit and retain staff within the construction sector. So they very much see working with us in these areas as to their benefit as well. So I'd say happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thank you very much, Pam. A positive and important report to update the committee. I'm not seeing any questions or comments on the chat bar. Colleagues, can we note the recommendations on page 35? The benefits in there are by no way exhaustive, but very much a flavour of what is happening. So hopefully that gives you comfort and satisfaction about what's going on. Right, if we can move on to agenda item 5 now, colleagues, it's the new supply programme update, and that's on page 43 of your papers. It's agenda item 5. Thanks, Pam. It's over to you again.
Thanks, convener. So this report provides an update on the progress with the delivery of the new supply programme. We agreed when we brought this report to committee last year that we would provide this annual update and that we would revise the targets accordingly to as we go along. So the report gives an update on where we're at to date. It also highlights a number of the challenges that the programme faces, not least related to COVID and Brexit and shortages of materials and labour, as I've already referenced. Despite that, hopefully members will agree there's been continues to be good progress overall with the delivery of the programme, with over 850 homes completed to date, and even more importantly, over 340 on site at the moment. And we're on target to complete 175 homes this year. And as members can see from the table and the targets set out in 2.4 of the report, we've got hopefully record completions due to come on stream over the next 3 to 4 years. So very hopefully positive in terms of contributing to meeting housing need in the area. The other parts of the new supply programme is also updates around the use of the off-the-shelf purchase, which is another opportunity both in terms of the affordable housing policy areas in the north, where we maybe don't have as much land as we do in some of the other areas, and that's a really useful means of getting additional units into the supply, and also the development pathfinder approach, which again has been a useful tool in terms of progressing some town centre projects as well, such as the Orrs building, and there's a number of other projects that are in the pipeline or are under consideration. Maybe just to highlight, and again, as members are aware, because we've reported previously, and it won't be any great surprise, but costs are continuing to increase in terms of the cost of delivery, and that's outlined in the paper, that we're now on average around £190,000 per unit in terms of construction costs, and that will obviously increase, or potentially will increase, as changes in terms of standards are introduced. So around heating, we're not able to use gas supply for the heating, and also the use of sprinklers. However, to partly offset that, the Scottish Government have agreed to increase the grant that's available to the council or to housing providers, and that rate has been confirmed as a minimum for the council of £71,500 per unit, and there's also additional allowances on top of that to reflect some of these higher standards. So on average, that would probably bring our grant level up to £81,000 per unit for the units going forward. So that is obviously welcome, and will partly offset some of the increases in costs. So I think, just to sum up, despite the challenges that are set out, continue to make good progress, and as you'll see from the procurement report later on, there's a number of projects that are now progressing towards getting onto site. So hopefully members will continue to see projects across the North Lanarkshire area. So happy to take questions, convener.
Thank you very much, Pam. I appreciate that report. Councillor Ballantyne, can I come to you first, please?
Thanks, Chair. On page 52, Mabel Street, it's got here the comments planning approval, planning approved, and yet in our last meeting on this same agenda item, the project was on hold, was the comments. Has there been any update on the Mabel Street, Pamela?
Yeah, so just to clarify, the project does have planning permission, but the well, as you know, there's a number of challenges with it in terms of delivery. And the one I think I said last time that we were working on or need to resolve before, or as well as the issue of the boxing club, was around the Scottish Water connection. So that has been progressed in terms of the options for that, which are not straightforward and certainly won't be cheap either. And we really wanted to make sure that we had a sort of viable solution for that before we really got into much more detailed negotiations with the boxing club about the options for them. So we are trying to move the two things, those two things along in parallel, but it wouldn't feel as if it was appropriate to have gone too far with the boxing club if we then find that there was an insurmountable issue with Scottish Water. So it's ongoing, I think would be fair to say, but it's not a case that the project's on hold, as in not going to be progressed. It was just that those were the two issues that were causing the problem for that particular development. So hopefully that gives you some of the assurance that it's not, as I say, forgotten about. It has been progressed, but those are the two challenges on that project.
Thanks very much, Pamela. That okay for you, Councillor Valentine? I saw your thumb up. Excellent. Come to Councillor Castles, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's page 45, 212. It's the open market purchase scheme. It's just to inquire, is this done by observing the market, or are there approaches from homeowners themselves who wish to sell back their properties? And what are the limitations or observations in terms of cost, location, and the type of house that you would be looking for to buy back?
Councillor Castles, I appreciate that you're a substitute. There is a very clear criteria, and yes, approaches can be made direct, or indeed there is market overview. Pam, do you have anything further to add?
Yeah, and obviously there's a more detailed report on the agenda today, given the further update. But Councillor Castles, to be honest, in the main, the ones that we buy back are through direct approach from owners to the council, where they're looking to sell direct to us. We do scan the market and keep and look at what's available already advertised on the open market, and we have made some purchases in that way, but the majority of purchases are from direct approach from owners looking to sell their properties to us. And the costs, I think on average, is about £66,000 is what we're paying. Obviously, the costs vary significantly across areas and depending on quality, etc., and size, and the kind of the pair costs are on average about £15,000. So it's still, adding everything together, very good value for money overall, I think, for as part of the new supply programme. But hopefully we can pick up if there's any other issues as part of the new supply update report later on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Goldie, can I come to you next, please?
Thanks, Convener. It's just a question, page 53. It's on the Kingfisher Downfield road development. Now, I understand that this was dependent on the developer getting planning permission and going ahead, and then the council would buy the properties from them. It was just to see if there's any update on that. Has the planning permission been applied for? And just if I think previously we said if they don't get planning permission, obviously we don't proceed with a purchase because there wouldn't be houses there. But just to see, is there a time limit on the developer getting planning permission, building, and then a subsequent council purchase?
I don't know if I don't have the detail of that. I need to get that for you, Councillor Goldie. I don't know if Tony's on the call. I don't know if Tony's got any update on the Kingfisher development.
Hi everyone, sorry I don't have an update on whether they have the planning application or not, but I'll find that out, Councillor Goldie, and get that passed on to you.
Colleagues, can I encourage you when you get the papers, if there are any ones that you have questions about, please don't hesitate to contact the officers, because often these are in the areas that are closest to our wards and we want to ask about. So thanks for that. As we've raised the issues of the open market purchase scheme, I would like to take that paper now rather than later in the agenda, as I think it makes sense. So this was the additional paper in your pack, Pam, if that would be okay. But before we go on to that, can we approve the recommendations and note them as is outlined in paper 5, colleagues? Can we do that? Thank you very much. So if I can come on to the additional report, which is the open market purchase scheme update, and Pam, can I get you to do that now, please?
Okay, thanks, convener. So yes, as you say, the open market purchase scheme, we do the 6-monthly update to committee in terms of progress with the purchases in the last 6 months. So just by way of a further update in terms of the number of purchases completed to date. So as outlined in the report, as at the 6th of October, there was 24 purchases that have been completed so far this financial year. So as of yesterday, that number is now 40 that have been completed, and there's a further 21 that are with legal and a further 29 that are with our estates teams for survey. As sort of indicated in the report, the target is 130 for the year, but given where we're at in the financial year, and also the fact that due to COVID, there was a pause on surveys being done and some of the conveyancing work being delayed. So we now would probably estimate that we would be near about 100 homes completed within the financial year rather than the 130. But obviously we're continuing to go flat out in terms of completing as many as possible. The other, I suppose, point to note in this, just for members' interest, is part of the advantage of this scheme is that it also sometimes enables us to get complete ownership of mixed tenure blocks, and that in turn then enables us to progress common works and common repairs. And just for interest, of the 40 that have been purchased so far this year, 10 of those purchases have been of flats that have given us complete ownership, and a further 10 have given us majority ownership. So as I say, it's a really important part of the programme. So the report also, as well as obviously updating on the current scheme, is proposing an expansion to a slight expansion to the open market purchase scheme that would allow us to, on a targeted basis, to acquire properties if there's maybe one owner left in a block of flats where there's a need for common works to be done, or a need for works to be done to that flat, and we've not been able to progress because of the one remaining owner. We are proposing that in those circumstances we would use or give the opportunity to the owner to buy their property from them, and if they wish, they could remain in the flat as a tenant. And that would then unlock or enable the council to then progress works to that block. So it's it'd be a targeted approach, and to say we're not sure how many exactly we would be we would purchase on that basis, but we've allowed for or assumed approximately or up to 50 per annum starting from next year. So we are seeking that approval for that extension to the scheme. So other than that, I'm happy to take any questions, convener.
Thank you very much for the overview of that report, Pam. Councillor Beveridge, can I come to you first, please?
Thanks, convener. Thanks, Pam. It seems to take a hang of a lot of time to purchase these empty houses. That's my experience in my area, where they've been sitting for years. What's the sort of, I know it's a difficult one, but what's the sort of average timescale for when you start the process? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it does vary, and as you know, the scheme is a combination of what was the empty homes purchase scheme, where we were proactively trying to buy maybe long-term empty properties, and that can be more sometimes complicated. There might be issues about the family and if it's been issues around inheritance and so on, so they can take a long time. But where it's the more straightforward ones, where owners have approached us and there's no issues. Sometimes there's issues about people having to get warrants and various, just like any other house sale. So it does vary, but overall, the process, can be reasonably quick, depending on, obviously there was delays, as I said, with COVID and getting surveys done. But the process is relatively slick. We get the application, we agree if we want to purchase it, it goes to the estates team, they organise the survey, we make an offer. If they accept it, it then goes to conveyancing. So it's as quick as it can be, as with any purchase, house purchase. But in terms of average time, I don't have the average time to hand, but we could certainly get that for you, just as a kind of average to give you a rule of thumb.
Okay, thanks, Pam. Thanks, Davina. I know it's an individual allocations, but I'll maybe send them up to you then, Pam. All right, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Beveridge. Councillor Hogg, can I come to you next, please?
Yep, thank you, convener. It's really just to say thanks to Pamela for the work she's doing in trying to increase the number of vacant ex-council properties. I mean, I do have two very close to where I stay, Neighbourne Hill now, and one of them has put me in quite a dilemma because it's neighbours that have came to me personally, and I've been here for a couple of years now, and I can't feed back the difference between the paper reality that we have as a council and the situation on the ground. What I mean by that is the neighbours know that a house has been empty for at least 14 years, and yet on paper, I'm not going to mention that because this is being live streamed, I believe. So the paper reality is that someone's staying there, despite a window being open, ivy growing everywhere, and about several years of post and stuff accumulated at the door. It's blatantly the case there's been no one living there for well over a decade. Everyone in the street knows that, and yet on paper we have supposedly someone renting that place. And the last communication I've had was that the owner would be moving in to get it improved and then selling it. And the date for that was meant to be literally this week. There's no sign of any activity. No one's been living there for well over a decade. And I can't respond to constituents on this because I can't tell them the truth, that we are accepting that situation. I know that Pamela's doing the best work she can behind the scenes, and this may come on stream at some point. It would be great to see it repurchased, or the owner themselves actually doing something, because there's rats and other issues for the neighbours, etc. Because there's always environmental issues if someone neglects a house for well over a decade. So sometimes this can be a really complex and difficult situation for all of us to be involved in. Just thought I'd point that out.
Thanks, Paddy. And what I would say, if there's any issues like that, again, please take that to officers to seek advice and how to make best progress, because ultimately we want to have safe communities, and but ultimately it's an owner's choice about what it chooses to do with what they choose to do with the property that they, or properties that they own. And ultimately we're looking to get diversification in our ability to supply new properties to our tenants. So hopefully this process could assist. I'm not seeing any further questions in the chat bar, colleagues. There is a clear need to approve this. We know that there will be significant interest in this, but we need to look at the targets and manage them appropriately as we go forward. So can we note the recommendations and approve as is outlined in the recommendation section of this report? Thank you for your thumbs up, colleagues. I'll take that as approval, and we will move on to the agenda proper now on item 6, which is the compulsory purchase order of the private properties at Mill Cross Road, Cumbernauld, and the construction of the new homes to follow. Pamela.
Thanks, convener. So this report is seeking approval for a revised approach, a revised strategy to address the serious stock condition problems that most members will be very aware of at the Millcroft Road flats in Cumbernauld. And the proposal obviously involves the acquisition using CPO, demolition of the flats and the redevelopment of the cleared site to build new council homes for social rent on the site. As I've said, and as is outlined in the report, the issues at Millcroft Road are probably well documented and well known, and a result of long-term lack of maintenance and effective management, and lack of factoring arrangements over many years. There's a high level of private renting in these blocks, and that's contributed to ongoing and serious problems of antisocial behaviour, fire raising, and concerns about health and safety as a result of that, vandalism, continued issues about dumping of rubbish both within closes, outside, fly tipping, and all of the issues that are associated with that, as well as ongoing criminality and issues that caused by some of the residents. So it's a very unsatisfactory and poor quality environment for the residents of the flats, and indeed for the residents of the wider area. As a result of all of that, and looking at all of the options, and the council worked with owners over many years, and I was involved in that in my previous role, and we tried to do work with owners to undertake necessary repairs, and we served maintenance orders on the blocks and did work through enforcement. Despite all of that, it's not been possible to really bring these properties up to standard, partly or largely because of the titles in these blocks makes it so complicated and very unrealistic to be able to progress common works. So it was agreed in end of 2017 that the best long-term solution was to progress with a compulsory purchase order for the flats, and that we would then progress with demolition and redevelopment. And at that point, Sanctuary Housing Association were going to lead on the project, really partly as a result of their own success with the reprovisioning of the multi-storey blocks, and because they had new build development that was coming on stream that would assist with the rehousing for the owner-occupiers. Regrettably, it's not been possible to proceed on that basis for a number of reasons, and it's now, in order to try and move the project on, proposed that the council, through the new supply team, will lead on the delivery of the project, but Sanctuary will still provide assistance by way of access to new properties at Burns Road for the eligible owner-occupiers to assist with the rehousing. It's obviously not practical to fully acquire on a voluntary basis, and that's why compulsory purchase is considered to be necessary in this instance, and that we will therefore need to move forward with, or we're seeking approval to move forward with a compulsory purchase order for the blocks. It may be that because of timescales, that the timescale for the completion of the Burns Road properties, that it might be that we need to acquire a number of properties in advance of the CPO to enable owner-occupiers, eligible owner-occupiers to move earlier than possibly the timescale for the completion of the CPO. So we're obviously also seeking approval for that approach as part of the recommendations. We will obviously very mindful that this is people's homes, and the need to work very sensitively and closely with all the residents and the owners involved, and also in terms of their financial circumstances being very different, to have bespoke discussions and solutions with people. We therefore have recognised that there's likely to be a need for additional resources on a temporary basis, both within the new supply team and also in Housing Solutions in terms of supporting the rehousing process. And we are looking at that at the moment in terms of taking that forward. We also recognise that, that this is not a cheap project, and that this will have significant costs associated with it, as outlined in the report, is currently estimated at over £21 million. Although we should highlight that about over £16 million of that is obviously for the new build element of the project, and we have allowed for the inflation as part of that. So these are the best estimates that we can provide at the moment. The Scottish Government have confirmed that they will continue, as they previously did, that they will continue to support the project with grant funding, but it's not been possible to agree the final grant figure with the Scottish Government, because obviously still a lot still to be firmed up in terms of the final costs. So we've estimated as a conservative estimate at £8 million, and that was before, as I say, the recent increase in grant. So we would estimate that would be a higher amount, and that the balance of the cost of this project can be met from the Housing and Revenue account as through the Council's new supply programme budget. So I think that's the main points to maybe highlight, Convener, but I appreciate there's quite a lot in the report, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Pam. It's a substantial and important report that's got the potential to be really transformative in Cumbernauld. Councillor Burrows, can I come to you, please?
Convener, thank you very much. Convener, I don't know the area, Millcroft Road, so apologies for that, Convener. I've got a question, but before that I ask my specific question, can I ask Pamela, is the majority of the householders here under private landlord situation? If I could get that confirmed first, Convener, then I'll ask my question. Thanks.
Yeah, the vast majority are private landlords. A very small number, I think less than 50 now, are actually owner occupiers. So,
thank you for that, Convener. I'll pose my question because I know Tony's on the line as well. It's about landlord responsibility, Convener. This obviously hasn't been going on just for a few weeks or a month. This has been going on for years. And I know that we have, the council, got landlord registration and we've got powers with that. Can you tell me, Convener, through your officers, what have we been doing with that responsibility, about landlord responsibility for these houses? It's not that, I think that the setup, the plan is perfect, Convener, absolutely. But I'm just wondering what we've been doing over the years with the landlord responsibility with that. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Councillor Burrows. I'm very aware that there's been proactive dialogue and engagement with owners. Tony or Pam, are you able to give some further detail on that?
Yeah, just as well, I suppose probably not a lot of detail in terms of the landlord registration and what's been done there, but I do know, and mainly from, as I say, my past experience, how much time and effort was put in to trying to use all of the council's enforcement powers that it had available to, in effect, ensure that owners were meeting their responsibilities. But it is very challenging, I have to say, and the fact that there was not a factoring arrangement in place compounded that. So we have had other examples in other areas where if a private landlord was not paying a bill, in effect that was due, so maybe from a factor, then that was evidence that could be used in terms of the fit and proper person panel. But where no such arrangement exists, in effect there's nobody organising the pairs, it is more difficult, I think, to use those powers in that way. So I think a general answer is that we have, as a council, across the services, doing everything that we can do in terms of the powers and the enforcement powers that we have, including serving, putting charges and titles and using the maintenance officer, maintenance order and the enforcement powers. But it's not easy in terms of actually being able to really bring private landlords to account in terms of their responsibilities. And given the scale of the issue here, I don't think that is ever really going to be the practical way forward in terms of the resource that would require as well from the council to really try and deliver that. But we do and have been using the powers that we've got available, but it's just not ultimately not effective.
Convener, can I possibly, with your indulgence, have a quick supplementary with that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, of course.
Convener, I would have expected Pamela, Tony and all the team would have tried everything they can with the landlord. There's no doubt about that. Like yourself, I trust the team to do all of those things. But the bottom line for us in housing is that we have a legislation in place for landlord registration. And it may well be, I don't know, I'm not up to speed with it, but maybe there's a need to review that to progress that. Because if it's a toothless situation where we cannot enforce it, because what we're going to now have is private landlords are going to be subject to a CPO that we're going to give them money to buy them out. And it seems that there might be some landlords might be quite happy to sit there and wait and know what's going to happen with that. However, I'm saying to you, Convener, maybe we need some information at a future meeting just about what is the landlord registration, what is the power they have, what is it for that. But listen, the bottom line is it's important that that area, as you said, Convener, but the redevelopment of that area is important, and I support the paper. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks very much, Councillor Burrows. I would like to give the committee comfort that these are in many ways it was an inappropriate design for the climate that we find ourselves in, heavily concreted, often flat roofed, and many of the people there find themselves in a real negative equity situation as well. There's a high turnover of tenants within the area, which compounds some of the fly tipping and antisocial behaviours and fire raising and wider issues there. And there are people who are just trying to have happy lives in there too. So this is genuinely trying. So this is the location just behind the town centre in Cumbernauld as well. So a challenging environment for those who live there. And indeed, owners aren't going to make money out of this. If there's private landlords sitting there going, the council's going to be a cash cow, that will not be the case. We are very diligent in the public purse, and it will only be the district valuer allow us to offer is what will be on the table. But the detail is in the report there for those who would like to move into a shared equity or a tenancy position in Brownroad and in other places. I've got other questions here, so I would like to move to Councillor Beveridge now.
Thanks, Vida. This issue was highlighted, if you remember right, a couple of months ago when we had an first-class input from Brian Lafferty and his team regarding the issues surrounding private landlords. But a quick question to Pamela, and it's deviating ever so slightly. You spoke about factoring. Could you tell me, Pamela, see when you're a new development is at the planning stage, is that a requirement for the planning to make sure the developer incorporates a factor into that area? Thanks.
I don't think that's a condition that we could, apply, but it is. They do have to provide details, I think, in terms of what the future arrangements would be. But it's not. I don't think something that we can then enforce in terms of whether that sometimes, as you know, factors can get appointed if people don't then pay for their bills, then that factor quite often obviously won't continue to deliver that service. And I know that sometimes that there is an expectation that the council somehow gets involved in that. But at the end of the day, that is not something that the council can get involved in. So I think it is an expectation that that's set out how it's envisaged that it would work, and obviously the titles allow for that. But not something that we can then necessarily enforce if it doesn't work to that effect. The issue at Millcroft Road, just as outlined in the report, is that the way that the titles have been drawn up for some strange and bizarre reason, that any kind of common repairs are spread across something like over 112 properties. So it's not even on a close by close basis. So it's just that that is just so impractical to enforce that, and I think that's probably the reason why, in effect, these blocks have never had an effective factoring arrangement. and anything that we have tried to support the owners with has broken down for kind of obvious reasons. When you're trying to bill somebody that's 3 or 4 closes away for something that's happened in another close, it's just not practical.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hogg.
Thanks, Ravina. As a former councillor for Ward 3, I'm aware, along with Councillor Goldie and Councillor Graham, of the ongoing issues we've had here for decades. When I first came to Cumbernauld in '96, the Millcroft flats were so close to the train station, it was perfect for commuting. And at that point, they were well sought after. But the terrible thing that has occurred has been, as Pamela has emphasised and colleagues have pointed out, has been the deterioration of the area based on the lack of proper involvement of factors and zero factors. So there's been serious deterioration of properties and external areas, etc., that just have not been looked after. And generally, people look on the parts down near Millcroft, near the roundabout, etc., and assume that the council own the land there, etc. And we quite often get the blame for things that's nothing to do with us. So there's been hundreds of issues, and I know from myself and colleagues that there's been literally hundreds and hundreds of examples where we've had officers trying to protect tenants, where they were being pretty much ignored and mistreated by what you could call London-based property portfolios who are buying like almost one block of flats at a time. Absentee landlords is a massive issue. So I welcome the CPO, and we know the standards that North Lanarkshire Council build houses and flats to. So this is definitely the best way forward to improve the area, rebuild the flats, and make them at conditions and levels that our tenants will be far happier with. So I'm delighted that this is being progressed.
Thank you, Paddy. That's appreciated. I've got no other comments or questions in the chat bar. Colleagues, on page 55, the recommendations are outlined. I'm going to narrate them because of the importance of them. Not that I'm saying any other reports are not, but it's just that we're given a very particular set of permissions here, and that is to approve the strategy for the council to progress the acquisition, demolition and new build at Millcroft Road. 2, to approve the making of a compulsory purchase order for the land and houses shown outlined in Appendix 1 for the purpose of the provision of housing accommodation. Gives authority to the head of legal and democratic solutions to prepare the compulsory purchase documentation and take all necessary steps, including the publication of all statutory notices to secure the confirmation order by Scottish ministers, and vesting the land and houses in the council, and gives authority to progress the voluntary acquisitions to owner occupiers in tandem with the promotion of the CPOs as set out in 2.9. Can we agree, those colleagues? Thank you very much for your support on that. Moving on again to Pamela at item 7, it's page 65.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be very, very brief. This report is really just seeking approval to progress to the next stage of procurement for a number of new build sites, as previously approved by the committee in September, in terms of the proposed procurement route and approach. To utilise the available frameworks and the available contractors or contractors who had capacity to deliver these projects. So quite a significant number of projects, as you can see, that we're proposing to take forward through this route. And as I say, this report's just seeking approval to move to the next stage, which is to finalise tenders from these contractors for these particular sites. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks very much, Pam. I appreciate your narration of the report. I don't have any questions or comments in the chat bar, colleagues, for item 7. Can we approve the recommendations as they are written on pages 65 and 66 of the report? Thank you very much. If we can move on to item 8 now, please. That is the tower strategy update. Brian, can I come to you, please?
Thanks, convener. I'll try as best I can. This is again a 6-monthly report which we bring to committee on the progress of the Tower Strategy programme. So we'll go straight to section 2 in relation to the ambition of the 1,329 properties now emptied in line with the change of programme to bring them down. And as of October 2021, there are 6 owners in the first phase of the demolition programme whose property is required to be reprovisioned. 5 already been done so, and we're in negotiation with the remaining and another one. Burnside Court and Coatbridge is now down. Low-rise flats at Gouthrappel is underway. Again, the timescales for delivery of each phase have come to been reviewed. The private owner remains within the one of the low-rise blocks, and as again previously said, we're in negotiation to resolve that issue. Tender documents are currently being developed for the demolition of low-rises at Shawhead and the high-rises at Corsington and Berkshaw, which are due to commence next year. Phase 2 of the television programme is being evaluated for the findings to determine the running order for that once we went through all the paperwork. Sprinkler programme, fire safety programme. Phase 1 of the sprinkler programme is progressing well at Motherwell, Burnside, Lodge and Doonside. Tender returns for phase 2 were being assessed for Glassford, Woodside, Glen, Redbridge, Colchwood and Redbridge. And you will see further on there's a report to award those contracts now that the timescales of the reports are a gap between them. Fire stopping programme is now complete, with the exception of some no accesses we have to go back to. And likewise, the installation of the smoke detectors to meet the government's February 2022 deadline is now all but complete, apart from about 10% no access, which we're trying to get back in and hopefully complete by February 2022. The major refurbishment at the 4 Towers and Coatbridge continues to be ongoing at Merison, Blair Grove, Glen and Mulbrae, and engagement with the tenants continues in line with the COVID-19 safety measures to reduce the risk of unknown access for essential works. Again, phase 3 structural surveys are now complete, and we're working with consultants on the final report, and any future findings will be brought to committee to report the findings back. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Brian. Can I come to Councillor Weir first, please?
Hi, thanks, convener. Hi, can I just ask what your procedure is for people who refuse to move from the towers until they get exactly the property they want?
Thanks, Stephen. Could you answer that question in relation to the housing question?
Thanks very much, Councillor Weir. The process, we're 3.5 years into the process, and I've got to say I'm actually kind of stunned to a certain extent how smooth this has went overall. We're actually now at 80% for the 3.5 years, so we're actually 6 months ahead of schedule. We at the moment it's consultation, it's communication, it's talking to people, and I've got to say up to now people have been really reasonable. Yeah, we're always going to get some people who will say I'm not moving and I want such and such, but the localities across the whole, not just Motherwell, Coatbridge, Airdrie and Wishaw, are constantly in communication with people, and there's a reasonable turnover of housing that we've had in the 3.5 years, and up to now we have been able to find offers for people within reason. We can't have people holding the council to ransom. That's the last thing we can accept and allow to happen. From time to time it can happen, and we've got one case just now where they're quoting the Commonwealth Games, the flat in Glasgow, where they sat to the last minute. But overall, I've got to say, then people are moving out. The 3 blocks of flats at Corsington, Draffin and Allen are sitting nearly 80% empty. As they become more empty, then people are chatting our door more now to say, listen, I need a house out here and I want out. But I've got to say, at the moment, the feedback I'm getting is people are actually working really closely with us and they're being reasonable. There will be the odd person that will come that that we might need to serve some kind of legal notice on, because in terms of the situation, if someone refuses to go, there's a legal process there, and the legal process is like for like. So although we are trying to find an option for somebody that meets their needs, and people will ask for a certain type of house, at the end of the day, it's like for like. So if we've got to go down the legal route, we'd go down the legal route, and it would be forced on. It would be like for like, so it would be another flat. But that process or that route is there for us. We haven't had to use it yet.
Thanks, Stephen. Councillor Weir, I see you want a supplementary.
Thank you. So how long would that procedure take? I mean, is this really going to hold up the demolition of these flats if someone digs their heels in?
For council tenants, then no, there's a process through the courts. It's a mandatory So in other areas, you've got to go and you've got to prove a case for this type of thing, because we're not making somebody homeless. It's actually a mandatory eviction that's classed as. So if we go to a sheriff and say such and such a house is there, the sheriff will give the council the authority to go in and enforce the removal of that. Would we want to do that? No, we wouldn't want to do that. But the threat of that, usually even the threat of that actually ends up the person moves without us having to go down that road.
Brian, did I see you indicating that you wanted in there? Can you come in?
We did have an instance at Milton Court in Airdrie, Stephen, if you recall, where we had one tenant who was refusing to move out, but we very quickly went through the court procedure, and that didn't delay any programmes. That's all.
Thanks very much. I think it's a bit sensitive and appropriate communication.
Sorry, convener, it wasn't Milton Court, it was the top end of Airdrie.
Simple Hill?
Yeah, it was at Pentland Court. It was at Pentland Court in Airdrie, and as you know, that they're down now, and we're on site in my building. So we from time to time we get one, but as I say, it's all about consultation, communication, and we generally resolve it.
Thanks very much. Can I move on to Councillor Castles now, please?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question about security and safety of the residents as the flats begin to empty. From your experience, will there need to be, or is there envisaged any need for extra security? I'm just thinking as the high towers begin to empty and maybe floors are left with one resident on them, is it envisaged that will need to be some kind of extra security measures for the safety of those who are still in residence?
So, Councillor Castles, the answer is yes. And for the Coatbridge towers just now, we still have 24-hour service. We still have estate officers, the old concierge, and we have put additional resources in there, because as you said, sometimes I think people think as buildings become empty, you need less resources. You don't. You need more resources for a period of time. As a point of reassurance, what has happened in all the towers and all the properties where we're reprovisioning, then we have stripped everything out of the houses and we've actually secured the doors, and it's no longer like the old days when it was a steel door. If you walk into Dunbeth, Jackson or High Courts, then it's actually gyprock that's put over and it's painted over. And if you walk in, the place is spotlessly clean. I was down there last week myself. It's actually quite an eerie place, believe it or not, just now, because we're sitting at 80%. There's 6 landings in Jackson Court with nobody on it at all. And there's a number of landings with one person on it, but the concierge have been high profile. They're there every single day. They're walking, they're chatting people's doors, and it's not just there in the Coatbridge ones close to yourself. The same is happening at Draft and Corsington and Allen as well, although they don't have night time. The estate officers go off at 6 o'clock at night, but people were putting out extra resources to go and walk them at night, again, just to show a bit of reassurance. At the moment, touch wood, there has been no incidents, and people are aware that we have stripped everything of any value out of the properties. So it's not like years ago where houses were getting broken into, stuff being stolen, floods or whatever. That's not happened. Everybody is well aware that anything of its copper or anything of value has been taken out of the house and completely stripped back. So at the moment, touch wood, 3.5 years in, it's going very, very smoothly.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Can I come to Councillor Valentine now, please? Thanks.
At the last meeting, or the meeting before that, there was some issues with one of the refurbishment, I think, the Coatbridge towers, where we had an issue with the contractor almost bullying tenants, was the quote at the time. Can I have an update on that situation, please? Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Valentine. That's actually been looked into, and it wasn't as it appeared, but it's been resolved now, and we're continuing to liaise with the tenants as the process in terms of getting access to do the works that we need to do. So yeah, that's all settled down now.
Thanks very much. Can I come now to Councillor Burgess?
Thank you, convener. I don't know who I'm putting this to, actually. Maybe Stephen would be best. But do you have any kind of report coming forward on what effect the emptying of the towers has been on the general, allocation of normal procedures, houses to people who are in a desperate situation within their own particular problems at the moment, because of the volume that have been moved from towers into houses. You know, there are people who are in other circumstances who are not getting rehoused or actually looking for their first house. Is there anywhere along the line that there's been some kind of study done on that as to what is happening there? Have we got a problem on quantity or whatever?
That is something that we report in tandem often, Councillor Burgess. Stephen, I'm sure you would like to comment on this.
Yeah, just right at the very start of the project, Councillor Burgess, we looked at that and took that into account. So there was 1,700 properties were going to become empty. We reckon 1,400 of the 1,700 we would have a requirement to rehouse. So just under 1,500. You take that over the 5-year period of the project, it's 300 lets a year roughly. We allocate nearly between 2,500 and 3,000 houses a year. So percentage terms, it was 12%. So we actually designed the whole programme, rather than try to empty the flats in 2 years, then we actually designed it over a longer period of time, 5-year period, to minimise any effect on the wider waiting list. So 12% of the lets overall in any given year are going to the reprovisioning, which still leaves 88%. So there's still over 2,000 properties that become available every year that's going to the wider for a homeless list, for a general list, overcrowded, under-occupied. So the way we have done the reprovisioning is minimise the impact. Now, I appreciate as councillors, you're always getting people coming on who are looking for houses, but as I say, we've got the data and we constantly analyse it every single month to see how many houses have went to the reprovisioning list this time and how many have went. But over the 3.5 years, we're looking at 12%. So as I say, we are minimising overall impact, the wider impact to the wider people in the CHR.
Thanks very much. Councillor Beveridge, can I come to you next, please?
Thank you. I was just to that was I was spent on court, and Stephen and his team have dealt with the flats that's come down in my area admirably. Everyone's working well. The issue that we're having just now is regarding the new build, but again, our council officers must be complimented because they are holding the site agent to task and making sure everything is dealt with the locals in the area. So 10 out of 10, our department's working well on this. Thanks.
Thanks very much. It's compliments are always appreciated, Councillor Beveridge. Councillor Beard, you have already been in this topic, but I'll allow you to come back in.
Thank you very much. I just remembered I'm getting accusations because there's 3 towers in my ward. I'm getting accusations that they're being used as scatter flats, and I wanted to get some. Can't remember the word. I just wanted to find out if that's true.
Well, we don't have scatter flats in North Lanarkshire. We've got dispersed
I know, I
housing.
can't remember the PC name.
Dispersed housing we have. Stephen, do you want to comment to that?
So the council has got a statutory and legal responsibility to provide dispersed and homeless accommodation across all parts of North Lanarkshire. We have over 600 properties across all the areas. There is no particular area, Councillor Weir, where we decide to, like, if there's empty houses coming in your flats, we'll say we'll use 20 of them. The proportion overall is reasonable, and we're not saying for every property comes in, let's turn it into a homeless property just now. That's absolutely not happening. Is there some dispersed within the 3 tower blocks? Yes, there will be, but the overall proportion is reasonable across, and there's not an oversupply. Definitely not.
And again, if anyone just wants to seek clarity about that, about their own ward or a particular location, please raise that with the officers out with a committee. The recommendations are on page 73, and they're all to note. Can we note them, please, colleagues? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 9 is the local housing strategy 2021 to 2026. Stephen, can I come to you on this, please?
Thanks very much, Convener. The local housing strategy is an all 10-year plan that sets out the vision for the delivery of housing and housing-related services. The plan in front of you is for a 5-year period from now until 2026. It's a statutory requirement for all local authorities to produce and publish the local housing strategy. The new plan builds on the progress of the current plan, which was implemented and agreed at committee in 2016. The overall vision reflects the wider council ambition. There is seven strategic housing outcomes. I'll not go through the 7 of them. They're on page 80. at 2.2. The development of the local housing strategy has been overseen by a local housing strategy steering group. Within and on that steering group has been reps from wider council services, health and social care, Scottish Government, and also reps from local housing associations. Progress of the local housing strategy will be monitored regularly and reported on an annual basis. The key actions and indicators will be reported back to committee as well. We'll ensure committee gets an update. It's important we do. This, I've got to say, has been a significant and important piece of work, and I want to give my thanks to everybody that's been involved, certainly from my team and the wider teams across the council and the partners. The action plan is included on your papers or in your papers, page 84 onwards. If you look at the overall local housing strategy and a lot of the discussions today and at other committees, a lot of the issues that crop up, they are actually all included in it. So there's that theme running through the whole bit of business that we do. And we have given you a link for the local housing strategy. It's an extremely sizable document. I'll give you some bedtime reading, and happy to take any questions at all that anyone has on it.
Thanks very much, Stephen. As you say, a very important document that we have oversight of throughout the process. I don't have any questions or comments in the chat, but I would certainly like to convey my gratitude and thanks to staff within the service across the council, and indeed our partners in the community and other agencies for the way in which this has been evolved. It is a substantial document, colleagues, but I do recommend it to you to look through. So can we agree the recommendations on this report, colleagues? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 10, we have that on page 87. It's the Scottish Housing Regulator Landlord report. Stephen, this is to you as well.
Thanks again, Convener. Again, members will be aware that we require to report our performance on an annual basis to the Scottish Housing Regulator. Returns for the annual return of the Charter must be uploaded by the end of May. The regulator meets with the council on an annual basis as well. They actually meet with other councils on a more regular basis, depending on the return to the Charter. However, for the last couple of years, it's been an annual visit for ourselves. The regulator met with myself and some other officers on the 17th of September and confirmed that from their point of view, they had no areas of concern. Just a couple of areas to highlight in the negative initially. A couple of areas that are slightly below the Scottish averages in terms of our overall SHQS compliance and also rent collection. However, just to put a wee thing in there just now, that these are two new indicators, or sorry, not two new indicators, they are indicators that the criterion actually changed last year, and we have actually raised with the regulator because the returns from other local authorities don't quite add up in our opinion, and we have raised that as part of my meeting, and we put it in writing to the regulator that we are concerned that that they need to have an audit of that. So we don't believe that we are actually below the average. We believe that some of the returns from other local authorities, but we have raised it, and I just thought it was important to tell committee that today. On the positive side, we continue to outperform or be above the national average in a whole range of other areas. I'm not going through all the percentages, but average rent continues to be below, significantly below the average. Overall tenant satisfaction continues to be considerably above the national average for us. Repair right first time, satisfied with repair service, emergencies and non-emergencies, and overall satisfaction with the neighbourhood are all areas that the council continue to outperform and be above the national average in satisfaction levels. And again, happy convener to take any questions at all.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I don't have any questions or comments in the chat bar at this time. Can I convey my gratitude to the staff across housing for the continued efforts in all teams. You don't get a report like this, a positive report like this, an exemplary report like this without professionalism and dedication across the service, and I'm sure the committee will agree and convey their thanks across the service. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 11 is the update on the allocation policy.
Again, thanks very much, convener. The current allocation policy was approved, you'll see in your papers, in June 2008, 13 years ago. It was actually implemented in 2009, which is 12 years ago. The policy has been subject to significant review since then, There's been 4 previous reviews, and this was the 5th review. And in terms of this latest review, then the 3 main areas you'll see in the papers are how we deal with under occupation, which we've had other papers at committee in terms of an incentive to downsize. So we look to see about the level of points. Should we change the points to make it consistent with the overcrowding points? We also looked at how we prioritise armed forces veterans and people leaving the forces, and how we deal with owner-occupiers and the discretionary powers that have been given to all councils in terms of their allocation policy. A further area was added related to the change in legislation you'll see in the report, which is in terms of 2 months when someone's at risk of losing their accommodation in the private rented sector. At the moment, you get 150 points. The legislation's changing from 2 months to 6 months, which is temporary legislation that was brought in during COVID, and that's now going to be made statutory moving forward, even when COVID is over. So we had to look to make sure our allocation policy was consistent with that for the 150 points. You'll see at 2.10, the results of the survey was overwhelming majority of people backed all the areas. So 94% in favour of the under occupation proposals, 93% for the armed forces proposals, and 90% read the 2 to 6 months, and also 89% in favour of including owner occupiers within our allocation policy and within the CHR. And pretty much that's it. For the under occupation, it's been obviously discussed at committee on a number of occasions. The proposal is that they'll get the same points as the overcrowded, so you'll get a minimum of 50 points if you're under occupying, and then it'll be 10 points per additional bedroom you have. And as I say, the 2 to 6 months is 150 points you'll get at 6 months. What that gives us now, or what that will give us instead of people going into crisis, 2 months is really, really tight for us trying to get accommodation for somebody. If we have 6 months, it takes out the crisis situation, and hopefully we're able to work with someone to get them a house before they're actually evicted from the private rent. And again, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. As the committee's had sight of this and its evolution prior to the consultation process, can I come to Councillor Valentine, please?
Thanks, Chair. I congratulate the Housing Department on this allocation review. The 4 points under occupancy, veterans housing, the accommodation one, 2 months up to 6 months, every councillor here will appreciate that and hope that goes on, because we all have this panic stations when they get notice, people get notice being put out of private lets, and then they're chapping at your door saying, oh, I need a council house now. We now have a 6 month period with that that's in sync with the Scottish Government. Massively takes the stress out of not only the person in the private let, but the department. They don't have to go chasing about finding. They've got time to deal with it. So that is brilliant as well. And the fourth one obviously works as well. So the whole paper is the review is a positive for not only the council officers, but I believe for councillors and for tenants and potential tenants. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for those kind words. I really appreciate them, and I know the service do too. Councillor Jones.
Thanks very much. It was just again to congratulate the department. Councillor Cullen and myself had a meeting with the Scottish Veterans Housing Group, and they had nothing but praise for North Lanarkshire Council. It was held up as a good example at an event in Edinburgh. As one of the local authorities in Scotland who recognise and support the veterans at great length in comparison to others. So a big thank you. I passed some information on to Stephen, and he's followed up on that, which is absolutely brilliant. Congratulations to the department and the way that they're dealing with the veterans situation in particular, because that's a difficult situation to deal with when people are coming out of forces, sometimes with disabilities and other health issues, underlying health issues, hidden disabilities. And our department have been held up by the Scottish Veterans Housing as a good example right across the whole of Scotland. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Provost. We appreciate your comments. So can we agree to approve and note the recommendations on page 93, please, colleagues? Thank you very much for your support on this matter. Moving on to item 12, it's page 103. And it's Stephen yourself again, Tenant Hardship Grant Fund.
Thanks very much again, Convener. Tenant Hardship Grant Fund, the paper that's in front of you, the Scottish Government announced, we've spoken about this before, a £10 million grant fund to support tenants who are experiencing financial difficulty during the COVID pandemic. Our allocation for North Lanarkshire was £562,000 plus a £30,000 administrative sum. The fund is designed to be flexible, however there is a set criteria which is listed at 1.5 and page 104 in your papers. We've given you quite a significant appendix there in terms of how the fund should work and the information we've got from the government just now. The fund will be open to and is open to council tenants, RSL tenants and private tenants. So although we're administering the fund, I'm administering the fund as a social landlord of the council, but we're also administering the fund in terms of our homeless and preventative statutory responsibilities we have. So the fund is designed there to actually prevent eviction. We do anticipate that we will use up all £562,000. This is the first time, certainly in my career, that I've known it's a fund or a grant rather than having to be paid back. So this, to a certain extent, any grant or any award that is made will be paid straight into the rent account. It'll be paid straight to private landlords or the housing associations, and it is ultimately to sustain tenancies. But it's not an interest-free loan. It's not a loan in any way. It's actually a grant. The government seem to think we will not use the full allowance, but at the moment, my view is that we absolutely will. We've got to be very careful though, because this is about preventing eviction. We can't make an award to a landlord of £2,500 and then 6 months later they actually evict the tenant. There's no point in that. And you'll see in the papers it is designed to come to an agreement with a landlord who will commit to not evicting. I can't say, for instance, down the line that will then not happen, because we could make the award and somebody then stops paying rent again, and it could happen at a future date. But at the moment it's to avoid eviction and continue to sustain tenancy. So the council, although we're a social landlord, we're also responsible for overall administration of this fund for private landlords, council tenants and RSLs. And again, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Stephen. An important report here. I don't see any questions or comments in the chat bar. Colleagues, can we note the recommendation of the report? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 13 on page 137 is the Housing Revenue Account. Greg, can I come to you, please?
Yep, thanks, Convener. Good morning, everyone. So this is a report, annual report for the HRA revenue estimates. And the report considers the cost pressures and savings that the HRA will experience in 22-23. So the cost pressures are about £5.9 million, as highlighted in section 2. It includes things like anticipated pay awards, inflationary rises for repairs and maintenance contracts, and the ongoing revenue costs associated with the HRA's capital investment programme. We've also highlighted £1.8 million worth of base budget savings. The largest element of that is for loan debt reprofiling, which was approved at the Finance and Resources Committee late last year. The report's highlighting that to maintain current levels of service provision, a rent increase and to meet that budget gap of £4.1 million, a rent increase of just over 3% would be required. And that it's recommending that the council meets or considers the rent levels and the HRA revenue estimates at a meeting of the council in December. I'm happy to take any questions, but otherwise the report would be remitted to council in December for consideration.
Thank you very much, Greg, for that report. I have no comments and questions in the chat bar, and I'm sure we will have full discussion and debate of it at the council in December. So can we note the contents of this report as outlined in the recommendations? Thank you very much, colleagues. Moving now on to 14A, Greg, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. So this is the HRA revenue monitoring report that takes us up to period 7. So that's up to the 15th of October. And at this stage of the financial year, we're anticipating a surplus on the HRA of just under £500,000. Just a few points to highlight how that arises. So we've got turnover savings within staffing of just over £600,000 and underspends associated with reduced legal and sheriff officer fees because of the ongoing restrictions on eviction activity. But that's then partially offset by reduced income from court fees or fines and laundry income. So that 485,000 projected surplus can be considered by Council when it's setting the HRA budget in December. The last sort of point that I'll comment on is just about the approved savings. So the HRA is assumed to meet 100% of its savings targets for the year, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Greg. Are there any comments or questions? I've got none in the chat bar. Can we note the report? Thank you very much, colleagues. Moving on to agenda item 14B on page 153. Greg, it's yourself again.
Yep, thanks, Convener. So the Enterprise and Communities Revenue Monitoring Reports, this is the non-HRA side. We're projecting at this stage of the financial year an underspend of £973,000. Underlying that position, we've got a service underspend of just about £1.5 million and overspends within COVID costs of just around about £500,000. So that nets off to that £973,000. And there's several reasons for that. So the main reason really for the underspend is vacancy savings across the service. Difficulties in recruiting. The sort of market's been a bit sort of difficult over the last year in recruiting staff. We've also had some additional grant income that's covered core service provision, which has generated an underspend. And we've had additional planning and building standards fee income throughout the year. Those things are partially offset, or those underspends are partially offset by some additional staffing costs in areas like waste solutions, where there continues to be a requirement to provide the service. And then we've also got an overspend within housing, property and projects, where we've created a repairs and renewals fund to support and future-proof the central repairs account. The service expects to meet just around about 90% of its approved savings for the year. And the gap in that achievement is linked to just delays and timing issues and staffing related savings. But management actions in place to meet that gap in year, and the actions are in place to ensure that those savings are managed permanently. Again, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Greg. I don't have any questions in the chat bar, colleagues. Anyone? No. Can we note the report as the recommendations outlined on page 153? Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 15A, the HRA Capital Monitoring Report, Greg.
Yep, thanks, Kavina. So on the mainstream capital programme, we're currently projecting an underspend of around £11 million. I think I've highlighted the previous committees that that's as a result of a number of external factors, but primarily as a result of COVID and Brexit. And Pam and Brian have both mentioned them already in the committee today, particularly early in the financial year when there were lockdown restrictions, but it's on a continuing basis because of the wider difficulties in the external market with labour and raw material shortages. So that position is not unique for the HRA. The General Fund Capital Programme has experienced similar issues, and I'll go and discuss a wee bit about that later in the next report. But the service has worked with contractors and reviewed work profiles, just in an attempt to accelerate as much as possible into the current financial year. But even after those attempts, there's still an underspend projected in the current financial year of £11 million. That expenditure will be reprofiled to future years of the capital programme, and that will be considered by committee in February. For the new build programme, as Pam said earlier on, because of the progress that's been made, we're currently projecting the new build programme on target for the current financial year. But for the open market purchase scheme, we're currently projecting a small underspend of around £270,000. And that's linked to just the number of properties that we're expecting to bring back in the current financial year, just because of the time taken for conveyancing and things like that, and the delays that were inbuilt at the beginning of the year. So overall, although we've got the £11 million underspend position, that will be spent in future years. It's just not been spent in the current financial year, so there's no sort of overall programme reduction. It's just the timing of when that expenditure will take place. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thanks very much, Greg. Councillor Valentine, can I come to you, please?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not sure if this is a question for Greg or not. On page 167, bullet point 216, the Council's written to the Scottish Government asking for consideration to be given to increasing the funding gap with the maximum level of EES ABS funding that can be used in each property. There's 2 paragraphs before that that sort of give details of it. Obviously, we've got an allocation of 2.786 million from the Scottish Government to deal with these. Now, what I'm asking here, and hopefully they know the answer because I've already asked the question offline, but just to let everybody know, what is the funding cap at the moment? And what are the Council asking the Scottish Government to increase the funding cap to? Thank you.
Thanks very much. Do we have a volunteer to answer this question? Brian, we'll come to you in the first instance. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. So what's happened, Councillor Valentine, previously there was a cap of, if we were doing flats, for example, it was 7,600 roughly, and if you add on some heat allocation to that, we're managing to do the work free of charge for the owners. But now we re-tendered our roof and render programmes earlier in the year, and the costs have increased somewhat. And there's also been another additional pass to the cost. So we're now looking at a contribution of 2,600 from the owners to help us do the work in those areas. Because the total is now 12,400. So that's for flats, and we're asking the Scottish Government in the letter to increase the work to flats by £3,000. And likewise on certain house types like Bellstone, for example, previously it was £9,500 to do the work, and we managed the cap on that was more than covered by the heat charge allocation and eco monies. But now the cost, the base cost has went from 9,350 to 14,300. Plus you add 5,000 on for pass elements of the work, which includes extending eaves and roofs and gutters, etc., which we didn't do before because insulation wasn't as thick. So it's went to 60 multi by 120 to achieve the U values and the K values for the houses. So now that's up at 19,300, with the cap being somewhere in the region of 9,300, and we're asking the government to increase that by up to £8,500, £9,000 for those types of houses. So we've had a response from the Scottish Government in the last few days. We're reviewing that just now, and we're going into consultation with the Scottish Government because I've asked us to contact them to see what the art of the possible is here. So that's actually that's the position we're in just now.
Thank you very much, Brian. You'll see that the letter was outlined at 2.1.6. That was a joint letter saying from each of the political group leaders, and as a result of an update report that was taken at policy and strategy, or policy and strategy. I thought I said the wrong name of committee there. So we will continue to discuss and debate. We believe that we are probably one of the first councils to encounter such an issue because of the way in which we've programmed our work so effectively. So we hope that we can get into dialogue with Scottish Government and make change not only for ourselves, but for owner occupiers across Scotland, because it's such an important area, and we just want to make sure that we with Government get that right. I've got no other questions in the chat bar, so can we agree the recommendations as outlined, colleagues? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 15B. Greg, can I come back to you, please?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. So following the approval of a programme reprofiling exercise at Policy and Strategy Committee at the end of September, the service is currently projecting a break-even position, and that's highlighted in paragraph 2.2. But in paragraph 2.3, what we're highlighting is that despite that reprofiling exercise, we're continuing to experience a number of sort of ongoing programme risks and challenges for delivery, and that's been particularly linked to areas like the town community hubs and the emerging picture in relation to some of the external factors like the availability of vehicles. So there are still programme risks associated with the capital programme, and we've got an upcoming strategic capital delivery group in December to discuss that and make some proposals for the future delivery of the capital programme and what the profile expenditure might look like. We'll report that back to the committee in February, so there's an update on that. But otherwise, at the moment for enterprise and communities, we're reporting a break-even position I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Greg. Councillor Goldie, can I come to you, please?
It's just on the mention of availability of vehicles. I've heard this from another source as well, that it's becoming almost impossible to renew vans whenever the time to change them is, and also to hire vans, and it's to do with the kind of computer chips, and certainly I believe companies like Volkswagen are finding it more commercially viable instead of putting them into vans to put them into cars. Is that the case, and do we think that will continue? The availability of vehicles will become more difficult over the next while?
So at the moment, Councillor Goldie, we've got the vehicles that are required to deliver services. It's just that part of the capital programme was about a renewal programme. So we've got arrangements in place to continue to use the existing vehicles. It's just a case of getting new vehicles from suppliers, and that kind of supply chain, because of the difficulties with chips, that supply chain is now longer, or the lead-in time is now longer than it might have been. And there's been chat about that being up to like 20, 30 weeks lead-in time after an order being placed. So it won't cause any problems for service delivery, because we've got existing vehicles that we can cover that.
Thanks very much for that, Greg. I've got no other questions or comments. Can we agree item 15B, please, colleagues? Thank you very much. Moving on to 16A, we're moving on to the contract section. The first one is the framework agreement for Sheriff Officers Services. Stephen.
Thanks, Convener. This is a standard contract. We already have a contract in place. We require to have Sheriff Officers fees, our Sheriff Officer Services detailed in your report. It's a 4-year contract. It's 2 years plus 2, sorry, 2 years plus 1 plus 1. On the report, you'll see the incumbent contractors. It's Walker Love just now for Lot 1, Fraser Irvine being proposed for Lot 2, Malcolm J. Boyd at Lot 2, and sorry, Malcolm J. Boyd retaining that. So Lot 1, just to confirm, Walker Love for Lot 1 was incumbent, and it's Fraser Irvine that's been proposed. And again, I'm happy to take any clarification or any questions on this contract.
Councillor Valentine.
Aye, Stephen stole my thunder there a wee bit. Right, just on all these ATF, the 6 of them, can I thank the department for giving us the incumbent service providers, so that we can understand that, you know, whether it's been a takeover or whether it's somebody continuing. I did ask for this at the last meeting, and thankfully in all 6 of them, there's 4 which are contracts that are continuing and have told us, and they've even went to the stage where 2 of the contracts are completely standalone contracts, and they've told us there's no incumbent in it. So thank the department very much for that wee piece of information that helps all councillors deal or look at these contracts. Thank you.
You're most welcome, Councillor Valentine. Can we agree the recommendations for this report, colleagues? Thank you very much. Moving on to item 16B, another contract. It's the tenants' home contents insurance contract. Stephen, anything to add?
No, it's a long-standing contract that we've had for tenant home contents insurance. Just to clarify, it looks like a lot of money that we've put down there, £2.2 million over the 5 years. It doesn't cost the council £2.2 million, doesn't cost the council anything. This is a negotiated sum that we have went out. It's a low-cost home contents insurance for tenants. You can pretty much for 60 pence a week, you can get £5,000, £6,000, £7,000 cover. You won't get that anywhere else now out in the market, and the priority for us again is to make sure we are telling tenants the benefit of this. People think it will never happen to them. It can. Fires, floods and everything else, people end up with nothing. So it's a negotiated amount of money. You will not get that anywhere, and we will be right now doing pretty robust PR on this. And right now to tenants, we do have a significant number of tenants who take it, but it's other tenants we need to get as well. So again, just to clarify, there's no cost to the council in this, and it's a low cost for the tenant. So it's a really positive story.
I couldn't agree more, Stephen. It's an exceptional value insurance contract for our tenants that can be paid very easily with their rent, I believe. I have no comments or questions. Can we agree, colleagues? Thank you very much. Moving on to 16C, the contract award for housing support services. Stephen, can you talk us through this one?
Yeah, again, really crucial and important service that we're procuring. It's been procured for a long number of years, consistency and stability there. And you'll see the information that Councillor Valentine and other members had asked for previously in terms of who had the contract, who will have it, in terms of the services we deliver to homeless and make sure we're sustaining tenancies, helping people with addiction and everything else. Then really key and crucial service that we require and will continue to require. Is more important than ever for everything that's going on just now. But again, standard procurement, it's contract for 3 years, 2 years with a discretionary a third year for the council.
Thanks very much, and great to see long established and well experienced contracts being provided here to some of our most vulnerable tenants. No questions or comments in the bar. Can we approve this contract, colleagues? Yep, thank you very much. Moving on to 16D, the contract award for closed circuit TV and the related services. Stephen, do you have anything to add to the report?
No, not really. Convener, just a report that speaks for itself. It shows you the level of the CCTV provision across the council and the types of work we do, not just in council housing areas or whatever, but across the whole estate in North Lanarkshire. Again, it's a really key in terms of our community safety responsibilities. This is a key service that we run, and to back up that key service, we require this type of contract in terms of the equipment that we use. So again, it's a standard contract overall with 5 years, but 3 years plus 1 and 1.
Thank you very much. Vital across our communities. Can we agree this, colleagues? Thank you very much. Moving on to 16E, which is the contract award for the phase 2 retrofit of the sprinklers and associated works at 5 North Lanarkshire tower blocks. Brian, do you have anything to add to the report?
No, other than it's the 5 blocks I mentioned earlier that was getting evaluated, that this is now put forward for approval because of the time lapse in the reports. And again, as Councillor Valentine pointed out, that's a standalone procurement that was going to come with.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brian. I see no comments or questions in the chat bar. Can we approve this contract, colleagues? Excellent. Thank you very much. Can we move on to 16F now? Brian, anything to add to this contract approval report?
No, as again, as Councillor Valentine, there was no incumbent, it's a standalone contract and it's a standalone award. I think you're on mute, Convener.
Sorry, I should have had my glove puppet up there talking. Can we agree this contract, colleagues? We have no questions or comments in the chat bar. Thanks ever so much. Moving on now to item 17. These are the contracts awarded below committee approval threshold, and this is here for your information. Can we note that report, colleagues? Thank you very much. And can I thank you for your participation and patience this morning with our technical difficulties earlier. I wish you a good day and we'll see you at the next committee soon. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chair.